welcome back to another video here at the Intent Hockey Channel. Today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, a couple of other updates including a coaching firing, and we've also got a couple of trade rumors to talk about involving the Flames, the Flyers, the Sabres, and the Vancouver Canucks. And go to all of that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey Channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. It really does help with the channel and on the road to 500 subscribers. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below discussing all those discussed in today's video. So today's video, we got another news and rumor video to discuss some more interesting things happened from our past couple of days. So we're going to start off as we usually do by looking at some of the signings from our past couple of days. We're going to touch on 8 signings here, 7 of them ELCs. So lots of intriguing signings that happened from our past couple of days. First, the only non-ELC one because of his age was with the Detroit Red Wings, as they signed young player Edward Tralmaks to a 1-year deal with AV of $775,000. Now Tralmaks looks like a very good player. He's been playing over in Czechia this year, has had some stints at the pro level with AHL and ECHL games. So interesting out there. I think it's just for the rest of the season, so interesting sign there. I don't think Tralmaks will ever be more than like a depth player, maybe a call-up option. So interesting out there. He's 28 years old right now. He's a center prospect, so interesting out there. But the Red Wings have signed him to a 1-year ELC. Then we saw Minnesota signed 2024 6th round pick, who's a left-shot defenseman, Stevie Leskovar, to a 3-year ELC with $860,000. Leskovar has been playing over in the OHL over the past couple of years. Looks pretty good. I think he has like 6 points in 38 games this year as an OHL defenseman, which is not too bad. So all in all, interesting signing there for the Wild. I think Leskovar eventually could be a solid 3rd pair, maybe 7th defenseman. So interesting out there. But the Wild have signed Leskovar, who was a 2024 6th round pick, to a new deal. So interesting out there. Next, we're going to New York Islanders. They signed center prospect, who's an undrafted guy, Gleb Vermiev, to a 2-year ELC with a of $885,000. Vermiev looks like a pretty good prospect. He's been playing over in the NCAA, so he was an unsigned player from over in the NCAA. He had 9 goals and 17 points in 37 games this year, so a pretty down year after his season last year, but still looks like a very fantastic forward prospect. I think Vermiev might eventually be able to be playing in like a 3rd-line role there for the Islanders if he is able to produce well. So interesting out there, but the Islanders have signed Vermiev, who was an undrafted prospect, to a 2-year ELC. Then we saw the San Jose Sharks signed 2022 2nd round picks, one of the higher picks in the 2nd round of the 2022 draft, Cameron Lund, to a 3-year ELC with AAV of $941,000. Now Lund was actually one of the top prospects in the San Jose Sharks organization. He's been playing over in the NCAA. This past year had 18 goals and 40 points in 37 NCAA games. Looked pretty good. Actually had 30 points in 35 games last year over in the NCAA. He's already gone to 2 games with San Jose Sharks, putting up a goal. So London looks like a very fantastic player. Should be a top 9 forward either next year or going forward. So interesting signing there for the Sharks, but they have signed Cameron Lund to a 3-year ELC. Another player who got a 3-year ELC was a former Canucks prospect who was dealt to the New York Rangers, and that was Jackson Dorrington. Dorrington, who was one of the prospects dealt as part of the JT Miller trade to the New York Rangers. He's a left-shot defenseman. He is a 2022 6th round pick of the Vancouver Canucks. He signs his 3-year ELC with an AV of $852,000. So Dorrington looks like a very fantastic defensive prospect. This past year has been playing over the NCAA, has 2 goals and 15 points, which was a career high in 37 NCAA games. So looks like a very fantastic prospect there for the New York Rangers. I think eventually Dorrington should be a solid 3rd, maybe 2nd pair of defenseman there for the New York Rangers. Already he's playing 2 AHL games at this point, so interesting out there. But Dorrington, who was traded earlier in the year by Vancouver to New York as part of the JT Miller trade, has now signed his 3-year ELC in New York, so interesting out there. Next, we also saw the Tampa Bay Lightning sign a prospect as left-wing prospect Robert Flinton, who was a 7th round pick all the way back in the 2021 draft. They signed a 2-year ELC with a AV of $885,000 with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, this looks like a very fantastic prospect there for the Bolts. So far this year, he had 11 goals goals and 24 points in 32 NCAA games over in college, after he had 15 goals and 25 points in 30 games the year prior. So it looks like a pretty fantastic forward prospect playing over the NCAA. I think Flinton could eventually be a decent third line forward there for the Bolts. So another interesting sign there is Tampa signed Flinton to a 2-year ELC. Another guy who got a 2-year ELC was left winger Ayrton Martino, who was a third round pick, 73rd overall back in the 2021 draft, gets a 2-year ELC with an AAV of $868,000. Now Martino's been playing over the NCAA. This year had 25 goals and 51 points in 39 NCAA games after he had 27 points last year. So Martino looks like a really fantastic prospect there for the Stars. I think eventually should be a solid middle six forward there, and is probably one of the top end Stars prospects at this point in time. So interesting note there. But the Stars have one of their top prospects in Ayrton Martino to a 2-year ELC. And the last ELC we're going to talk about here today was with the Calgary Flames, as they have signed undrafted goalie prospect Owen Say to a 1-year ELC with an AAV of $873,000. Now Say has been playing over in the NCAA as well this past year, played 27 games over the NCAA, putting up a 2.82 GAA and a 920 save percentage, the save percentage being the highest of his career over the NCAA. So that looks like a pretty good prospect there for the Calgary Flames. Say, I think eventually might be able to be challenging for like a decent backup role in Calgary. So interesting note there. But that was the other signing we saw from our past couple of days, was Owen Say in the Calgary Flames organization. So interesting note there. But the Flames, Stars, Bolts, Rangers, Islanders, Sharks, and Wild have all signed ELCs, and the Detroit Red Wings have signed Tralmaks to a 1-year deal. So interesting note there. Next, we're going to a couple of injury updates from our past couple of days. We have a couple of injury updates to talk about here from our past couple of days. So first, Jason Dickinson, who we talked about, I think it was a couple of videos ago, as being injured. He has been ruled out for the season with a wrist injury. So it's a bad blow there for the Hawks. Dickinson's been a decent, serviceable second or third line center. So see him go out of the lineup to finish out the season's not overly great, but it will open up a roster spot for a younger player. So interesting note there. Dickinson's not going to play this year. For Vegas, Shea Theodore, who has been out since the Four Nations face-off, was activated for long-term injury reserve and returned to game action on Tuesday. So really good boost there for the Knights to get Theodore back. He's a very fantastic top 4D for the Golden Knights. Interesting note there. While Raphael Lavoie, who has been out for over 2 weeks, was activated off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Tuesday as well. So really good boost there for the Golden Knights to get a decent bomb six forward in Lavoie, as well as top 4 defenseman Shea Theodore back into the lineup. Then we saw Peter Mrazek leave Monday's game with an undisclosed injury and is now day-to-day. So it's a bad blow there for the Red Wings to see Mrazek be injured or miss time due to injury. While Cam Talbot missed Tuesday's game with an undisclosed injury and was out day-to-day, but did wind up getting back in game action on Thursday. So interesting note there. But the Red Wings goaltending core took a really big hit over the past week with some injuries to Talbot and Mrazek. Minnesota's Jonas Brodin, who had been out for over a month with an injury, returned to game action on Tuesday. So that's a big boost there for the Wild, as Brodin is a very fantastic defensive-minded top 4 defenseman in the Wild organization. So really good stuff there. Declan Chisholm left Monday's game with a lower body injury and is out day-to-day. So it's a bad blow there for the Wild to see Chisholm be out for a little bit of time. And then Joel Eriksson and Kirill Kaprizov, who have both missed extended period of time at this point in time, have both started skating before practice and may start traveling with the team. Big steps in the road to recovery for both Wild forwards. So interesting out there. Great to see Brodin's back. It's bad to see a solid depth defenseman like Chisholm's out. And good to see Kaprizov and Eriksson are starting to work towards getting back into their lineup. So interesting out there. Edmonton's Leon Draisaitl might be able to return from injury at some point earlier than McDavid. So it seems like Draisaitl will be back probably over the weekend. If not over the weekend, then at some point early next week. So interesting note there. But Leon Draisaitl does seem to be nearing a return after missing a couple of games due to his injury, and McDavid should follow closely after. So interesting note there. Anaheim Sam Colangelo returned to game action on Wednesday after missing 2 weeks with upper body injury. So that's great news there for the Ducks. Colangelo, before going out with an injury, was actually playing really fantastic hockey. So really good to see that Sam Colangelo's back. Matt Rempe in the New York Rangers organization has been ruled out week to week with an upper body injury. So that's a bad blow there for Rangers to lose a solid bomb six forward. Evgeny Malkin missed Thursday's game with upper body injury and is out day-to-day. So hopefully Malkin won't miss too much time. That's a bad blow there for the Penguins. And Andrei Svechnikov, who had missed 7 games with upper body injury, returned to game action on Friday. So really good stuff there for the Hurricanes as they were able to wind up getting Svechnikov back. So some interesting injury updates from the past couple of days. Good to see guys like Svechnikov, Colangelo, Brodin, and Theodore all return to game action. Hopefully they don't look too rusty in their returns. So bad news to see guys like Dickinson, Mrazek, Rempe, and Malkin all be out with injuries, and hopefully they won't be out for an overly long period of time. But some interesting injury updates from the past couple of days. Next, just going over to a quick waiver update. The Nashville Predators, I think it was over on Wednesday or Thursday, placed 2 players on waivers. That was Bellows and Mark Gaizo. Both of those guys are lower end guys. Gaizo's I think a 7th or 8th defenseman on the blue line. Bellows was like a 13th, 14th forward. So they didn't need them at the NHL level, so they placed them on waivers. Now, unfortunately, if teams do wind up claiming players at this point in time, they cannot play with them for the rest of the season. So at this point in time, waiver claims would probably not be advised for most teams, given the fact they just not play for the playoffs. So interesting note there. So I don't think it comes as too much of a surprise that both guys did wind up clearing. Even if it was the possibility that these two could have played for different teams if they were claimed off of waivers, I highly doubt either of those two would have been claimed. Gaizo's been a decent depth defenseman here for the Predators this year, and Bellows is mostly as AHL forward. So interesting note there, but Gaizo and Bellows were both placed on waivers and both cleared, so interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a coaching firing. Now, we saw a couple coaching firings earlier in the year with guys like Boston, who fired Montgomery, St. Louis, who fired Bannister, Chicago fired Richardson, and then a little bit after that, Detroit fired Lalonde. So there was a couple of interesting coaching firings that happened earlier in the year, but there's now been another one. It was just a handful of games left to go before the end of the season, and that was in Philadelphia, as they've officially fired John Tortorella as head coach and brought in Brad Shaw as the interim head coach. So not too surprising there. After Michkov and some of those young prospects started coming and the Flyers announced they're going through a rebuild, there was a lot of talk about Tortorella probably not being the best coach for a rebuilding team. So after the poor play the Flyers have had this year, I think they're on like a 10 or 11 game losing streak at that point. They wound up firing Tortorella, so not too surprising there. The Flyers never had a 90-point season under Tortorella. He was in the third of a 4-year deal, so he did have one more season left on his contract, but he's not going to play that now. Tortorella's complete season record over his 3 years coaching Philadelphia was 97, 107, and 33. So he had 65 points at this point this year. He had 87 points last year, just was on the playoffs, and he had 75 points the year before. So Philadelphia has not been overly great under John Tortorella, so they figured it was time to move on. They bring in Brad Shaw as the interim head coach. So Brad Shaw does have some head coaching experience in his career. He was an interim head coach, I think, all the way back in 04-05 for the New York Islanders. The Islanders didn't make the playoffs that year, but he does have some head coaching experience. He's been moving around over the past little while. He was the St. Louis Blues assistant coach for a little while. He was the Blue Jackets assistant coach for a little while. He was the Canucks assistant coach for a little while. He was named associate coach in Philadelphia in 2022, and now he's the interim head coach. So not too surprising that he was announced to be the new interim head coach. So I'm not sure if Shaw will wind up getting the job or if they'll try and do some more interviews and try and get someone more long-term. I've seen some people out there say maybe they should try and target Rick Tocchet from Vancouver if they don't resign him. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there, but the Flyers have fired John Tortorella, and he's no longer the head coach of Philadelphia, as the interim head coach is now Brad Shaw for the rest of the regular season. So interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we got a couple of trade rumors here to talk about in this video. So to start with, we're going to look at the Philadelphia Flyers. Just talked about them with John Tortorella. So I was sort of wondering what the next move could be for the Flyers. So they just made a coaching change, made a GM change only like a year or two ago, so they won't make any more GM changes. But this team is not overly great. They had lost like 10 of 11 or 11 of 12 games. They're on a really sour stretch before the coaching firing. Now they've got a couple of wins, but still, it's not overly great stuff there for Philadelphia. So I do wonder what could be next for Philadelphia Flyers, like what sort of is their next move. So basically, when I was looking at their roster, there's not a whole bunch I think they're going to sell off this offseason. Like if you look at their defense, there's a lot of younger players, York, Samuel, things like that. You have an older veteran like Sealer, but I don't think he'll get moved. On the goaltending side, you have Urson, you have Fedotov. I personally think Urson's a really good tandem goaltender. I personally think eventually they will have to get a long-term starter. I don't think Fedotov or Urson are going to be long-term starters for this Philadelphia Flyers team, but I do think that we could see them try and make some sort of goaltending move. I think that would be to add someone, not to subtract someone. On the forward group, you've got Couturier still signed. I highly doubt he gets moved this offseason. Konechny just signed a long-term extension. Tippett just signed a long-term extension. After that, no one else really makes a whole bunch of sense of moving unless they're moving one of their younger RFAs. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think the one name that stands out as the next Flyer who could potentially get moved would be Rasmus Ristolainen. He's got this year plus I think 2 more seasons left after this year at a $5.1 million cap hit. He is a really solid top 4 defenseman. Won't put you up a whole bunch of points, but he's a really good defensive-minded guy and a guy who I think a lot of teams could really have some interest in. Now, the Flyers around the trade deadline wanted a first-round pick and maybe something else for him, so I think that's a little bit of a steep asking price for Ristolainen, but if they could get something similar to that, I do think they could consider a move in the offseason, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. I don't think the Flyers are going to be making too many big trades this upcoming offseason, and I do think they'll probably try and fix their problems either in the draft or free agency, but if there was to be one big move to watch out with the Philadelphia Flyers make this offseason, I would say probably Rasmus Ristolainen. That's just me saying this. I haven't seen this anywhere else, but still, definitely keep your eye on Rasmus Ristolainen, as with his being mentioned in the trade rumors and things like that at the trade deadline. I definitely think there's a possibility he gets moved, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. Going over to the Buffalo Sabres, Jeff Marek was recently talking with Gregg and they were talking about Buffalo, and Jeff Marek was wondering if maybe a guy who could get moved in the goaltending system in Buffalo would be Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Now, Luukkonen, I think he's in the first or second year of a long-term deal. I think it was like a 4 or 5 year deal at $4.75 million, so he's still signed for a couple more seasons. So I'm not saying it's a guarantee that Luukkonen will get moved, but I think it's probably more than likely that he will stay with Buffalo. But Marek does say that they do have Devin Levi in the system, and if they do really want Levi to be the full-time starter, there's a possibility we could see Luukkonen get moved. He does wonder also if this could be the next Ullmark, where Ullmark was decent in Buffalo but had inconsistencies. He didn't really want to remain there, so he left as UFA, signed in Boston, and has since become a Vezina winning goaltender. So I do wonder if he could potentially be something like that. Like, could it be another one of those things where a player leaves Buffalo and has success elsewhere? It's a very likely possibility. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee that Pekka Luukkonen does get moved, given the fact that he's such a good goaltender for Buffalo last year, and even though he's has inconsistencies, he's been a really solid goaltender this year, so I would be shocked a little bit if Buffalo did wind up moving him. But with the Sabres still having Devin Levi in the system and potentially wanting him to be the full-time starter at some point, I wouldn't be overly shocked with the Sabres trying to make some big moves this offseason if they were to potentially move a guy like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. And teams that come to mind who could use him would be like Edmonton or Detroit. Both those teams I think really need starting level goaltenders, and I don't think they have them at the NHL level at this point in time. So I do wonder if Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen did come available, would Edmonton or Detroit have some interest? So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen as he's a potential option here for trade in the Buffalo Sabres organization. Next, going over to the Calgary Flames. I've seen a couple of recent reports about this. I'm not sure if these are from legit sources or if these are just Flame fans speculating. It might just be Flame fans speculating about what the Flames should do, but I have seen a couple of numerous reports over on Twitter saying that the Calgary Flames, if they continue to fall and don't make the playoffs and have a rather sour stretch towards the end of the season, they may wind up considering moving some of their veterans on their team in the offseason. Now, we know that the Flames didn't make too many moves at the trade deadline because they didn't want to do a whole bunch after making so many moves over the past couple of years, and I can respect that. But in the offseason, they're probably going to want to try and go for more of a rebuild mentality, so I could definitely see the Flames try and move off some older type players. Now, if you look at the players who I think they could wind up moving, like, I don't think anyone's taking on Huberdeau's contract, as much as he has played a lot better this year than in the past few years in Calgary. I just don't see anyone taking on the $10.5 million cap hit. With the way Kadri's playing right now in Calgary, unless Kadri really asks out, I don't feel the Flames are going to move him. And with Weegar and Anderson, how good those two defensemen have been, I highly doubt those two get moved either. I think Weegar would be the more likely one, but I don't see either of those two getting moved either. So as much as I do think they will move off some veterans, I just can't see them moving off of Huberdeau, Kadri, Weegar, or Anderson. So if you take those guys off, the three main veterans I think they could wind up moving next year, if they did want to, would be Mikael Backlund, Blake Coleman, or Joel Farabee. Now, Farabee was acquired just a few months back by the Calgary Flames from Philadelphia, but he has not been overly well in Calgary, and I think that does mean that maybe the Flames could try and flip him in the offseason. On top of that, Coleman, I think, has 2 or 3 more years left after this year at $4.9 million, and he's actually worked quite well this year. And I think on a whole bunch of teams' middle sixes, he could be a very valuable add, especially to some cup contenders. So I do think there's a very likely possibility we could see a Blake Coleman deal in the offseason, and Mikael Backlund's going to be interested in the final year of their deal. If the Flames do not feel that they are going to be a playoff caliber team next year, I think they should try and move off Backlund, even though he's their captain, just to try and get him a fresh start and have him try and maybe go and chase the Stanley Cup. So we're gonna have to wait and see what happens there, but I have heard some rumblings about the Flames potentially moving veterans if they don't do too well to finish out this season. And looking at the roster, I see Backlund, Coleman, and Farabee as the three main likely players that I could see them when I'm moving. So we're gonna have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the Vancouver Canucks. I've seen this being brought up a couple of times, both on Twitter and on Canucks media, and that said that the Canucks try and target Bo Horvat and bring him back to Vancouver. Now, we know the Canucks center group is not what it once was. Like, if you look at it from last year's playoff run, they had Pettersson, they had Miller, they had Elias Lindholm, they had Teddy Blueger. They were stacked down the middle. And now with Pettersson out, with Filipino out, you got Suitors like your top line center, you got Bluegers like your second line center. It's not an overly great center group right now in the Vancouver Canucks organization. Even if Pettersson, even if Hedl were healthy, it's not the greatest of rooms. So this Canucks team has already seemed like they will be trying to target a second line center in the offseason. I mean, ideally, if you can have Pettersson as your 1C, someone new as your 2C, and Hedl as your 3C, you are set down the middle again. So I think they'll definitely try and target someone in the center market this offseason. Now, when it comes to who they could target, there's been a couple of people who've been mentioning some options that they could try and target, but one new name that seems to be coming up is Bo Horvat. He's got, I think, 5 or 6 more years left at $8.5 million cap hit. The only reason Horvat, who at the time was captain of the Vancouver Canucks, was dealt was because they were having to decide whether to keep Miller or keep Horvat, and which one they want to sign to a long-term extension. They chose to sign JT Miller to a long-term extension. They dealt Bo Horvat. Horvat's had some decent seasons over in the Islanders organization, but now JT Miller was just traded a couple of months back. So with that now being solved, do they try and bring back Bo Horvat? That's a possibility. Like, if they brought back Horvat as their second line center, I think that could be a really good addition there for the Vancouver Canucks down the middle. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee because I have no idea if the Islanders really want to move him. We've heard about them trying to move Pajot or Lee. I just don't know if they want to move Horvat too. But I do think if the Canucks could work out a decent enough deal, like you're probably thinking like a first round pick and a decent prospect, I think they could try and work out something to try and bring back Bo Horvat to Vancouver. So we're going to wait and see on that. But I have heard some recent rumblings that a good fit for the Canucks at the center position may be Bo Horvat in the Islanders organization. So we're going to wait and see on that. But that's what we're talking for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on all this down in the comment section below. What do you think about the Canucks? Do they try and target Bo Horvat? And if so, what sort of trade package would they have to give up to acquire him? What do you think about the Flames? Do they move off some veterans? And could Backlund, Coleman, or Farabee be some of the players so they wind up moving? What do you think about the Philadelphia Flyers? Is Ristolainen the next Flyer to get moved, or is it someone else? And what do you think of the Buffalo Sabres? Will they move Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen? Definitely have to get your thoughts on all of that, plus the sightings and the injury updates and the coaching firing from our past couple of days. Definitely have to get your thoughts on all of that. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video. If you're like to subscribe below, it really is helpful to the channel. And we're on the road to 500 subscribers. I also do a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that, so check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. And kind of see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.